Last Christmas, I gave you my heart, but the very next day, you gave it away. This year, to save me the tears, I'll give it to someone special. Bum, bum, ba-da-da-da-da-dum-dum, ba-da-da-da-dum. So today it's pretty obvious what movie we're talking about, and that movie is Last Christmas, 2019. This year, movie theater, the Christmas rom-com to go see, like, period. You know of any others that I'm missing out on, let me know, because that's kind of what we're doing here. But part of the reason why I went to go see it is because I've been really, really, really wanting to go see this movie in particular. If you've seen Crazy Rich Asians, chances are you also wanted to go see it. Or if you just like rom-coms like me or love Emilia Clarke, then yeah, that's a good enough reason as well. Also, if you love Emma Thompson, she both helped produce and was in it and is just an icon. So yeah, there's just many reasons to want to go see this movie. This movie is sponsored by my best friend Caitlin, who Venmoed me money literally so that I wouldn't feel guilty to go see this movie. I haven't been to the movies in a while, and she was like, "Go see it," and sponsored by her. Thanks. The movie starts with Emilia Clarke's character Kate, a beleaguered Christmas elf who is not exactly thrilled about the holidays or the Christmassy shop that she's forced to work in. Where have we seen that before? And we are given hints to her background and to the fact that she had been sick at one point sometime recently, and that she needs to take better care of herself, but she clearly is not having the best time at that. And we see her meeting another guy at a bar and telling him that she has this big gig the next day, that she just needs a place to sleep for the night, that she's just come into London. And he's like, okay. And then he's like, well, you could always sleep at my place. And she's like, oh, really? And they get it on, and then she sees him and he's being really nice to her, and you get the feeling like, okay, this could be a potential something for her, until oopsie daisy, it turns out he's kind of with someone else who catches her in the shower and she's kicked out of the house. Oops. Now, Kate's character does make a series of bad choices throughout the film, and not always the most morally, acceptable choices, but in that case, it really didn't have that much to do with her. Like, she didn't intentionally go into it knowing that he was with someone else, so that's his bad, but still. When she's kicked out, she still has her suitcase with her, and you see her dragging it across London, presumably to go to this gig that she was talking about, but instead she ends up going up the steps of a shop and begins to unlock it, and you quickly realize that, oh, she was lying. She definitely lives in London, but she just doesn't currently have a place to stay. So as she brings her suitcase into the workroom, her boss shows up and is like, what are you doing here early? And she's like, oh, it's fine. I just, kind of having roommate problems right now. And it kind of sets the stage for just what a hot mess she is at this point. When we talk about the setting of the movie, London is definitely the main focus, and whatever she had said before, sure, she's not from here. At the very beginning of the film, you see her and her family in Yugoslavia, and you get the feeling, as the movie goes on, you understand that her family are immigrants and that they had been forced to leave the country. So, to an extent, yes, she's not from London, absolutely, but she has lived there for a while. She just hasn't had a stable living condition for a little bit. The movie does go back and forth at certain points between the city life in London and some certain hideaways and little places that the romantic interest will begin to show her, as well as her family home, which is just outside the city, which will happen later. So now we come to our meet cute. The meet cute happens at her work while she is faux cleaning the windows and getting the shop ready, while her boss Santa is getting increasingly impatient with her for being lazy and not exactly doing her job the way that she's meant to. And she's just kind of rolling her eyes and like, whatever, and like cleaning the windows. But as she. I will say one of the downsides of the sweater is these baubles will bump things at points, so I apologize for that. So as she's cleaning, she looks through the window and sees a man just standing directly in front of her, looking up. And as he's looking up, he's just like distractedly like looking up and up, and eventually she comes out to go see what he's looking at. So he goes like, "We never get a bird like this in London, do we?" And she's like, "Yeah, I guess that's true." And then it poos in her eye. Splat. Meet cute. After wiping shit out of her eye, literally, Kate is wanting to get back to work, and yet he's there and is like, "Hey, do you want to go on a walk with me?" And she's like, "I don't know you, and you're weird. Goodbye." So that brings us from meet cute to chemistry. Do they have it? When do they have it? Okay, so initially, Henry Golding's character does not appear to be able to understand that she doesn't really want him to be around. Like, she may think he's attractive for all we know, but the vibe we're getting from her, yes, Dad, the vibe, is that she's kind of flustered and she's at work. It is not the time to ask her to go for a walk. She just got pooed on and she's doing her job. He also seems kind of like a Luddite. Like, he seems pretty anti-technology. He's like, I leave my phone locked in a cupboard somewhere. I don't touch it. It's a waste of time. You shouldn't, be on your phone all the time. Like, you should look up, look around you. And she's like, okay, whatever. And, they don't really seem very compatible in that way. Like, at this point in her life, she is sleeping around a lot, using apps like Swiper and getting drunk and not being the most responsible, admittedly, but also maybe not the exact match she would have made with him anyway. From what we get from the movie, she literally sleeps with a different guy most nights of the week, partly in order to get a place to sleep herself. And the character Tom, or Henry Golding's the opposite of her. He seems to have his act together. He seems very clean-cut and kind of like old-fashioned and all of these things. The next time they run into each other, she's just coming from that audition that we had, heard her talk about earlier, in which she was late for it because of her job and therefore almost missed the opportunity to audition at all, but they had already unplugged the speakers and made her audition a cappella, and she was trying to sing My Favorite Things from The Sound of Music, and it just did not go well, and the judges were kind of assholes about it and made fun of her, and so she is in a bad mood when she suddenly runs into Tom again. He decides to show her parts of the city, and he keeps telling her to look up and see things that she would never see otherwise. And he's like, "Look at this and look at that. Did you ever see this part of the city?" I don't think so. And he's showing her like all these old signs and all these kind of interesting hidden nooks of the city. And it finally gets to a point where she tells him her next audition will be for Disney on Ice, for Frozen, which, by the way, apparently he has never heard of. And she's like, how is that possible? But when he asks her if she knows how to ice skate, like assuming that she does, and she's like, nah, I'm just gonna wing it, he's like, oh. And as they continue to bump into each other, the next time they do, he takes her deep into this crazy hidden series of tunnels that leads up and through and into a secret ice skating rink so that he can teach her how to skate, which is really ridiculously cute. Okay, so the problem, aka that thing that keeps them apart. What is it that in the movie keeps them from just being together? Aside from the initial awkwardness of the beginning of the relationship, it does seem to improve the more they see each other. The cuter things are, the more comfortable they are with one another, the more they kind of begin to open each other up a little bit. But the most obvious reason why it doesn't immediately build, or why they don't click, as quickly is that Kate has a lot of like her own personal stuff that she's been going through. She nearly died some point before the movie began, wherein she actually almost a year ago had to have a heart transplant, and that whole situation really shook her up and shook her whole world up because, I mean, it's a huge, massive surgery and a life or death scenario, but in spite of the fact that it was successful and, you know, that now she's been given this, like, technically this new lease on life, she is spiraling in a way that everyone closest to her has begun to notice. Her best friends, her mother and her family, her boss. She's just not able to make connections or to be the person she was before the heart surgery. And because of this, it makes it very hard for anyone to get to know her, much less be in a relationship with her. On his side, he is not always available. The way his world works seems to be like almost mysterious and ridiculous because he just shows up whenever he wants to. He doesn't have a phone. He's not able to be contacted when she wants to contact him. So she just kind of has to hope that he'll show up again so that they can do stuff. And that's not exactly a great foundation for a relationship. When you think about relationships needing communication, and he's like, I'll see you. And she's like, okay. So as she continues to like engage in this self-destructive behavior, Tom is like trying to help like pull her out of this rut that she's put herself in. But in spite of like how compassionate and kind he is, it's clear that there's something holding him back. And it's not really hard to see why. When she comes back from a family event, like drunk and miserable because things went badly, he lets her come to his home finally. And it's like this neat, tiny little apartment. And she kind of tries to hit on him. And he's like, not tonight. You know, you're drunk. We're just going to go to bed. And he like puts her to sleep. And they have this intimate moment where she tells him, like, you know, how she's been feeling since the surgery and just that she doesn't feel like herself anymore. She's like, I used to be a singer. I used to want to do these things, and I don't feel like I am that person anymore. And he's like, who you are is made up of all the actions you make. It's not, am I a singer? Am I special? Am I, you know, this extroverted, like, happy-go-lucky person? It's how I treat other people. Obviously, she's convicted by this. And it actually does begin to impact the way that she acts from here on out from the rest of the movie. Pining. So how much do they pine? I would say that, at least from his end, initially you would say that Henry's character, Tom, he's the one that's pining more. And that you see that he's concerned for her. And that he's the one who wanted to start dating her in the first place. And that he wants her to, like, kind of clean up her act and to start behaving in a way that would be healthy for her. But as she does begin to make these steps and strides, like as she begins to start to make healthy choices for her life and, you know, starts actually caring about her work and the people she works with again, he becomes even more difficult to reach. And this is beginning to get exceptionally frustrating to her as she's wanting to, you know, actually have a relationship with him, and he's just not able to be contacted when she needs to contact him. Meanwhile, there's the rest of the cast of characters, sides, as I've called them before. For the old wise person trope, we have Michelle Yeoh as Santa, who is her boss, who owns the Christmas store, and who says that she loves Christmas more than anything, which is why she sells like a crazy amount of Christmas stuff and has everybody wear kind of crazy Christmas elf costumes all year round, apparently. But of course it is the most popular and the most busy during Christmas, naturally. She comes off as kind of bitchy, let's be real, and not kind, and very like very organized. But as the movie goes on, you begin to understand that Emilia Clarke's character had been working there for a while, and that she hadn't always behaved like this, and that a large reason why she hasn't been fired is because Santa is worried about her, and that she is frustrated with how she's behaving, but not to the point yet where she's going to fire her. But during the peak of Kate's self-destructive behavior, she goes out for the audition, the one that goes really badly, and forgets to lock up behind her. And when she forgets to lock up, basically they get robbed. When she comes to work the next day, she sees the police are there, the window's been broken into, and after the police leave, Santa tells her that she herself had broken the window because otherwise they wouldn't have gotten any insurance money for all the stuff that was stolen. And that she's like, you've turned me into a liar. Like, I never done anything like this before. Like, I hired you because you were so helpful and good and kind before, and now you're just irresponsible and lazy, and like, now you've turned me into a liar. Yeah. The other characters are her mom and dad, who you don't see the dad as much. He's a taxi driver who is often away from home. The mother is the most obviously distraught and isolated out of all of her family who left Yugoslavia. And you find out that the mother had really enjoyed taking care of her in the hospital and the attention she got from that, but that she's just been, incredibly lonely since she left and has not been able to make any connections with anyone else. And they're able to use the mother as like a subplot about anti-immigration sentiments in the UK and the whole Brexit scenario, where the mother begins to get tearful and stressed out about what she's seeing on TV and says, like, they hate us, they don't want us to be here, I know how this goes. Like, this is the beginning of how we're going to end up having to leave a country again. Like, that's something, like, that's repeated throughout the rest of the movie, like, that tone. And at another point, Emilia Clarke sees another Eastern European couple getting bullied on a bus by someone telling them to speak English, and so she stands up for them and is able to speak to them in their language, and basically get to be like an immigrant allegory, and it's really interesting to see it, especially coming from like a white European perspective, because it's not something you really think about that often. Yeah. And there's also her best friend and her best friend's husband, and her best friend's pregnant, and she was the first one to let her stay at her house. But Emilia Clarke's character is just too chaotic and brings a boy home to sleep with her in the guest room, which, by the way, is a room that is currently being turned into a nursery, and is not very subtle about it and about sneaking him out after he spent the night there, and then more or less accidentally destroys some of the hard work that the dad had been making for the baby, and eventually they're just sick of it. Aside from the immigrant storyline, the homeless storyline is another big important one within Last Christmas as well. Kate's character walks the line of realizing that she is in a place of privilege, in that if she really wanted to, she has a place she could go. She doesn't like being at home, but it is not so toxic that she couldn't go back home if she needed to. And that she really is making a choice by staying out instead of going back, whereas a lot of these people, or if not most of these people there, are homeless because they don't have anywhere else to go or anywhere else to be. And it's kind of, been part of her own hot mess journey that she gets to kind of play at being homeless instead of realizing like the sort of stigma and the reality that the actual homeless people within the movie and in London have to face every day. And that her own disgust at being told to go to a homeless shelter is enough for her to realize, or should be enough for her to realize, the stigma that even to her, who she doesn't have anywhere to go that night, that's like, ew, no thank you. And that as she begins to become a different person and a better person, especially one night when she's looking for Tom and after she hasn't seen him for a while, she kind of accidentally ends up volunteering at the homeless shelter, and then kind of begins to get more stuck in with the people there and realizes like how privileged she really is, but also how valuable it is to look after other people. So I would also say that the whole cute element, there's no dog or little kid So I'd say that her cast of friends and the people that she meets are the cute factor. Not in the, oh, little animal kind of cute, but in a, like, heartwarming sort of cute. So now we come to the compromising moment, the meet in the middle. Now that we know why they haven't been able to get together immediately and why things haven't worked out so far, and now that Kate has begun to work on herself and she's begun to make huge strides in becoming a better person and a person with purpose, even if she doesn't know what she wants to do for the rest of her life, she knows that she wants to help others and give herself purpose, even if it's temporary purpose. There's this part where, as things are going really well, Kate meets Tom at the park, who's, after looking for him forever, she sees him at the park on that bench that he's taken her to before, and she's a little annoyed, but she's mostly just happy to have run into him again, and they kind of cozy up together, and they end up kissing, and she's like ready to be like, okay, so it's almost like we're boyfriend and girlfriend, kind of like hint, hint, you know, relationships. You've ever heard of those? And he's like, you can't count on me, like you can't rely on me the way that you do. And she's like really taken aback by that. Before he can explain much more, she just kind of leaves in a flurry and in a flustered huff. And finally it gets to a point where she goes to his apartment to look for him, and she gets buzzed up, but not by Tom. And this man is there, and he's like, oh, you must be here to look at the apartment. And he shows her around, and she realizes that nobody lives there. And it's like, okay, so was he squatting here? And she kind of accidentally says that out loud, and the real estate agent's like, what? Someone's squatting here? Gosh darn it. He says, like, this place has been empty ever since that guy died who lived here. And you immediately have this sinking, uh-oh, oh no, sort of feeling. As she looks at the paper that he's holding that says that the owner, or the person who lived there before, you realize that Tom was the former owner and that he died. So as she realizes that he's dead, it all begins to click into place. The last Christmas, she had her emergency heart surgery, and he was in a accident delivering packages on his bike. She always sees him riding his bike, and he got hit and he was dying, and he was an organ donor, and so last Christmas he gave her his heart. The very next day they probably threw her heart away, her old one, because it was unusable. He's been gone for a year. She basically collapses on the floor as she realizes this, but she's okay and is able to find him again in the park. And this time they're able to talk, and he says, you know, that regardless he would have always found her somehow, and that he's been wanting to make sure that she looks out for his heart, that she takes care of it, that these things that he's been saying to her in part for her own health, it's also been for his heart that literally is beating with inside her. That those moments where she said, I don't feel like myself, that this heart, like, it doesn't feel like me, it's because it's his heart. And yeah, he says, I would have ended up giving you my heart some way or the other. And she realizes, like, these points where, like, the whole time she's been with him, like, that she's the only one that can see him, and that psychologically, that this is why people have been acting strangely about her and her date, and that it never really happens when there are a lot of people around, and that it's always just the two of them. But if anybody walked by or whatever, she always got weird looks. And she thought it was because she was being weird. Like, you know, she's wearing an elf costume, or she's kind of doing a quick change behind him, by the way, out of, like, her elf tights into other tights. Or, like, when they go to the ice skating rink and all of that, where she felt like he was with her, and to an extent, he was. But to a physical, bodied extent, he was not. So in the garden, in like, their favorite spot, she tells him that her heart will always belong to him, and he tells her to take care of it, and that's the last time you ever see him. And as he walks away and she stands up from the bench, you see that the bench was dedicated to him. I had seen some theories about the movie before I had seen it, and my own ridiculous brain had jumped to the fact that somehow she had been a donor, or somehow she had done something for him, or that maybe she was dying because she had been sick before, and that he was like from the afterlife and that he was going to bring her to the new world, or something. I have to admit that I didn't expect them to take it quite that literally. Yet it's done in a way that I don't feel is crazy cheesy or ridiculous. It does leave your head spinning and maybe a little teary. I got a little teary, not gonna lie, because you realize there's no way for them to really be together. But as you know, the song goes, so this year I'll give it to someone special. He tells her basically like Christmas and these things are about, like, life is about giving parts of yourself away. And this year, the heart that she's able to give away, maybe not in a physical sense, is by helping other people. She becomes a vastly less selfish person by the end of the movie. And instead of focusing on her own auditions or on herself, she focuses on putting on a talent show for the homeless shelter. And she helps audition them for different roles, and she helps pack it out with people to raise money for the shelter. And she actually makes relationships with them instead of doing kind of a shallow service for them. Like, she actually connects with them and they know her. So by this point, they're comfortable with her and they want to do this with her. And she isn't even going to perform until they kind of make her perform. As she sings Last Christmas, you know, like, it means way more to her than to literally anyone else in the movie. And as she tells them, like, life is about caring for other people, and that the way to have a happy life is to look after other people, you know that she actually believes that, and that it's come to mean something to her too. And yes, admit I did kind of skip over the fact that you do meet a cute person who also works at the homeless shelter, and it does kind of like slightly allude to the fact that they could end up dating at some point as a real person, a live person who's there. But that this really has been about her own journey, about how she's able to heal herself so that she can look out for other people, more than it is like a strict romance. A romantic dramedy. Super moving and fun and silly, and magical realism is involved, and all sorts of elements, and I think I'll have to give it an A as well. Okay, I forgot one major part, so that's why I'm going to weirdly interject to do that. So when she has this family dinner, you see her sister, who you briefly saw earlier, and she's this big shot lawyer, and definitely stands in stark contrast to her hot mess sister who works at a Christmas shop and who wants to be a singer and drinks all the time and things like that. This dinner that was supposed to be important to her for getting this promotion, out of her jealousy, she outs her sister as being a lesbian. The mother isn't that upset, mostly because she misses her daughter and just wants her to be around. But it's this big, no sort of moment that does end up getting fixed later as she begins to fix her life up. And she goes to apologize, and she meets her sister's girlfriend or fiance and apologizes. And by the end of the movie, you see all of them together, and they're all having dinner together, and they're all getting into some good old Yugoslavian traditions and songs, and Emma Thompson's a delight, and, kind of pained and funny and ridiculous, and yeah, there's just a lot of love for the family there. Yeah, don't out your sisters or friends or whatever just because you're upset. You have no idea the repercussions that could happen. That's an obvious statement, I would think. There are just some things don't do. I think siblings know the most deeply personal wounds that they could enact on someone else, and it's kind of a great power and a great responsibility to not do that. Luckily, her family's cool with it. It ends really well. But, yeah, I just thought it'd be remiss to not mention that. I really enjoyed it. I'm not a sad movie kind of person. You ask anyone, do I look like a sad movie person? But it's really meaningful and worth it, and absolutely go see it if you haven't yet. I really want to see it again, actually, so I might go do that. right now. With the note saying I love you, I meant it. Now I know what a fool I've been. But if you kiss me now, I know I'd fool me again.